So here we are for part 2 of the Restoration Colonies. We were discussing Pennsylvania, and I was going to specifically move on to Philadelphia. So it's an important port city for Pennsylvania. Quaker merchants there establish contact through the Atlantic world, and they participate in the thriving slave trade. It's a magnet for immigrants who came not only from England, but from all over Europe by the hundreds of thousands. The city itself, indeed all of Pennsylvania, appeared to be the best country for poor men and women, many of whom arrive as servants and dreamed of owning land. A very few, like the fortunate Benjamin Franklin, who is a runaway from Puritan Boston, did extraordinarily well. Other immigrant groups in the colony, most notably Germans and the Scotch-Irish, families from Scotland and England who had first lived in Ireland before moving to British America, greatly improved their lot in Pennsylvania. The Germans, this is where you have the miscommunication of Pennsylvania Dutch. It was just a misunderstanding. They were not Dutch, but they were German immigrants. But when you say Pennsylvanian Dutch, you mean your German descent, just for reference. So, this is just a map. We have the English settlements, 1689. Well, it also shows English territory claimed, but not effectively settled at this point. You can see they are slowly and rapidly moving inward. For reference, Philadelphia means the city of brotherly love, which should not be too shocking since Pennsylvania was settled by Quakers who were the Society of Friends. So, creating wealth for the empire remained a primary goal, though. In the second half of the 17th century, especially during this Restoration, England attempted to gain better control of trade with the American colonies. The mercantilist policies by which it tried to achieve this is known as the Navigation Acts. Mercantilism is the idea that a nation's power is determined by its wealth, gold or silver, specifically trade with its colonies. You have these Navigation Acts that are passed by King James II. In 1651, the Navigation Ordinance, a product of Cromwell's England, required that only English ships carry goods between England and the colonies. And that the captain and 3/4 of its crew must be English. It further listed that in articles that it could be transported only to England or to the English colonies. It was very specific. So after the ascending to the throne, Charles II approved the 1660 Navigation Acts, which restated the 1651 Act to ensure a monopoly on the imports from the colonies. Other Navigation Acts include the 1663 Staple Act and the 1673 Plantation Duties Act. The Staple Act barred colonists from importing goods that had not been made in England, creating a profitable monopoly for English exports and manufacturers. And in 1675, Charles II organized the Lords of Trade and Plantation, commonly known just as the Lords of Trade. It's an administrative body intended to create strong ties between the colonial government and the crown. However, the 1696 Navigation Act created the Board of Trade, replacing the Lords of Trade. This act meant to strengthen the enforcement of custom laws, also established the Vice Admiralty courts, where the Crown could prosecute customs violators without a jury. In this instance, it reminds me of the image from Pirates of the Caribbean when they are in Barbados. This is an excellent example of that. Despite, though, the Navigation Acts, Great Britain exercised very little control over the English colonies during most of the 18th century. And because the policies of the Prime Minister, Robert Walpole, during his term, 1721 to 42, he governed according to his belief that commerce flourished best when it was not restricted as heavily. Historians typically describe his lack of enforcement on the Navigation Acts as salutary neglect. In addition, nothing prevented colonists from building their own fleet of ships to engage in trade. So New England especially benefited from both the neglect and the vibrant maritime culture made possible by the scores of trading vessels built in the northern colonies where they were shipbuilding. So these are done, but they're not heavily enforced, and they're really hard to even try and enforce. So that is the end of part 2 of the Restoration Colonies. Please make sure you are reading chapter 3, and you need to start chapter 4.